Colorado Springs' #1 car show by default. This is Automotive ADHD.
I am honored to have my next guest joining me. He is a road safety advocate who has taken a tragedy in his life and devoted himself to guardrail safety. Now, his advocacy work has been featured on major network news. It's reached some of the highest political offices, and he also runs a YouTube channel to spread awareness where his videos have collectively been viewed over 72 million times. And most importantly, he is a father. You may know him as the Guardrail guy. Steve Eimers, welcome to Automotive ADHD.
Hey, how's it going, Matthew?
And I'm really glad to have you on, and I want to talk a little bit about your background firstly, and then if you're willing after the fact, I'd like you to share a little bit about your daughter Hannah and her story, if that's all right.
So, I'm Steve, and I was a registered nurse, and I was an EMT, and I was living in Western New York, and it's awful snowy there. Pretty high taxes, and about 20 some years ago, I decided, hey, I've had enough of healthcare. I'm going to move, and I'm going to make a career change. So I moved near to Knoxville, Tennessee, looked around the country, looked at tax structure, climate, and really liked what I saw in East Tennessee. Started a window cleaning business, and we had at the time we moved to Tennessee from New York, we had one daughter, Hannah, our oldest, had two other children, and then we adopted three from Eastern Europe and Ukraine, Kharkiv region, Kharkov, depending on whether you're using the Russified or the Ukrainian. Had a baby, adopted two out of the opioid epidemic, and then it was late October of 2016. Our daughter came to us and said, hey, our daughter Hannah said, my friend wants to place this baby and she's contemplating choices. And most of us are not really ever confronted with whether we truly believe what we say we believe, regardless of what we believe. And so we were, and we ended up agreeing to adopt a baby. I remember it was October 31st of 2016. I went to my wife and said, I've been trying to figure out every which way to get out of this. This child deserves to be wanted from right now. And 8 hours later, the sister that advocated for this young boy to join our family was killed in a crash with a guardrail where the guardrail speared through her vehicle. Oh, man. And so, we have... Nicholas, our youngest, has been. I would never suggest that anyone adopt to replace a child. That's not what we did. We had started this adoption beforehand, but he has been a bright light in a dark situation. Wow, and that just weighs heavy on my heart. Is just hearing that story and it's one of those things that you can't ever replace a person like that once they're gone. I mean, there's a hole in your life like that, and it's just, I think you've been really strong in being able to take that tragedy and turn some of your focus now into some of the advocacy work to prevent other families from experiencing that same type of tragedy. So tell me a little bit here going into, guardrails. That's your primary focus. And tell me a little bit about, what they do. Let's get like a Guardrail 101. We drive by guardrails every single day and we don't give them a second thought. So a lot of people may not really, I know a guardrail is supposed to stop me from going off the road here, but what do they do and why can they be so dangerous, especially in the circumstance involving Hannah? What is so dangerous about them? So the first thing I would say is guardrail is first and foremost a hazard. It is a ribbon of steel on the side of the road that you're going to hit at between 55 and 85 miles per hour. This is a hazard, and so we have to know that we have a greater hazard by which we're trying to mitigate that threat. And so the approach ends, the trailing and approach end of the guardrail are especially dangerous. So you need to treat them. And we have seen over and over with a number of the treatments that we have used, how some companies will cut corners. They will test in-house using essentially a dummy corporation and then self-certify. And the foxes are guarding the hen houses. Wow. And I have uncovered multiple systems where what was tested and reported to the Federal Highway Administration was not what was sold. I mean, I have certifications filed in Colorado where it said it was independent testing when in fact it was not. And it's not just the product involved in Hannah's Crush. This is multiple entities, and a lot of them will use lobbying over building a decent product. And that's not acceptable. I believe in a concept called the Imago Dei. Life has inherent transcendent value. And I'm not going to sit here and tolerate, one, the death of my child, but much less. I mean, it's one thing. I go back to Golda Meir, who was one of the first prime ministers of Israel, and she said, it's one thing that you kill our children, but you also force us to kill your children in return. And I can accept that what happened to Hannah happened, but I cannot accept that it's going to happen to somebody else. Right. In that same kind of light. That's completely unacceptable. And that's my goal now, is to raise awareness, because we have guardrails. I mean, I often highlight Tennessee, and unfortunately, Tennessee is probably in the top 20% of good performing states. We have states all across the United States who are much worse than Tennessee. I just happen to live here. Right. And they're the guardrails I can walk. I can't get to Colorado. But I mean, I see posts that have been burned up in wildfires, never replaced, posts that are rails that are rotten, rails that are functionally obsolete by decades, half a century, even blunt end concrete bridge rails, killing dozens of people annually in our most rural communities, and nobody's saying a word. It's safety theater.
It really is, especially when you think about these rural communities are oftentimes going to be in places where there are dangers. There's obstacles that require guardrails. I think back to Colorado, where this show airs on the radio, but I have listeners on the podcast all across the world. But I think here we've got, tons of mountains, and we've got ditches and ravines and these obstacles, things you would really not want to drive a car into. So the state comes along and they put guardrails everywhere. I mean, I see a ton of them, but even here driving to the radio station, I wasn't traversing any major mountain pass to get here, but there was a bridge with a little creek along the side of it, and there was a guardrail where the posts weren't bolted in. Right at the end of the terminal, you had the posts and you got the main rail. I didn't even notice it. I drive by it every day, and I noticed it today because I was thinking about this interview before coming in here, and I went, gee, that's not even bolted down. So that kind of brings me to ask you here. We've got a minute left in this segment, but ask you about what are some of the common issues you find on the road. What are some of the most common issues, and are they inherently a design flaw of the guardrail? Like you were saying, some of these companies get things lobby to have things approved that really shouldn't be, or is it also a combination of just poor installation on behalf of the contractors who put it in?
It's poor installation. It's poor design by the state DOT engineers, and it's often the wrong countermeasure and a lack of maintenance. I mean, when we have damaged products, I have found so many people that are being killed hitting damaged products. Or I just had a kid that was 18 years old killed in rural Kansas who hit a turn-down unit, which has been banned for since 1994. I was a senior in high school. So it's a holistic problem at every level, from the test labs to the manufacturers to the installers to the owners of the roadways, our state DOTs. And then we have a totally feckless Federal Highway Administration that has been completely, regardless of red or blue, utterly incompetent. And so those are our underlying problems, pretty much everything.
Wow. Hold that thought right there. We're going to go to a break. My guest is Steve Eimers, the Guardrail guy. We're talking about guardrail safety, advocacy for making guardrails safer. You're listening to Automotive ADHD. It's right here. Don't go anywhere.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Speed Council proudly presents Automotive ADHD, now on video. For better or for worse. Subscribe to Automotive ADHD, now playing on YouTube and Rumble.
And we're back for another segment here on the Automotive ADHD Show. Heard around the world as a podcast, also here in Southern Colorado on the radio. If you're just joining us, my guest is a guardrail safety advocate, Steve Eimers. You may know him as the Guardrail guy. Steve, thank you again for joining me here on Automotive ADHD.
Thanks for having me.
And so we were talking about in the break a little bit, how I came across your videos on YouTube, and, I was scrolling through YouTube Shorts, and I found one of your videos, and that took me down a rabbit hole. I watched a bunch of your videos, and that's really what got me thinking, we need to make people aware of the inherent issues that are happening on our roads right now. And so, we look at guardrails as an example, and that's a lot of your main focus. We drive by them every single day. We don't bat an eye at them. Maybe we see one, wow, that one's twisted up and damaged, and then we don't think about it. But tell me a little bit about guardrails again and how they've changed over the years, and how, especially with EVs coming into the mainstream, EVs are really heavy. How does that change how guardrails need to work?
So a lot of this goes back to force, kinetic energy. And it's made up of two things, mass and velocity. And so one thing that's happened over the years is the velocity has increased the vehicles. And the mass, we knew we had to anchor the ends. We also started seeing as SUVs and pickups started growing in height, the height has been raised now to 31 inches. We still have a lot of very old, low rail that is unanchored, even though, the anchors we've been saying since 1964. I have a news article in 1961 from Popular Science. But with EVs, going back to that whole mass, the issue of mass, it's devastating. Guardrails are tested at 5,000 pounds, a 5,000 pound pickup. And wow. I've recently looked at it. There are 118 EVs that are over 5,000 pounds. We can't protect them. These larger ones, the Hummer, the Ford pickups, we cannot protect them. They are going to go through these guardrails, and there's nothing we can do about it. Now, the University of Nebraska is studying that, but it's a huge problem, and very, very few people are talking about it. A few people at the Department of Defense, a few people at the University of Nebraska. But, we need folks like Elon Musk who, partly have given us the problem to help us find the solution.
Absolutely. And when you look at those EVs, you look at the weights of those cars. I've talked in length about EVs on my show here in the past. And one thing is, they're insanely heavy. That F-150 Lightning, it's a cool truck. It comes in at about 9,500 pounds. And that's something I think very few people consider when they get behind the wheel of it. If you get behind the wheel of a big box truck, for example, that might be 10,000 pounds, or, maybe you've got a truck and a trailer, a pickup truck with a trailer, you got 10,000 pounds, maybe 12,000 pounds. You're cognizant of that weight, about that weight, but the way they've designed EVs, they've designed them to, for one, stop well and turn well despite their mass. And that causes, I think, the perception behind the wheel. You don't think you're driving a 10,000 pound hunk of steel filled with flammable batteries down the road. I think people don't think of that. Is there, when you're looking at guardrail design, I'm sure the manufacturers, the designers, the engineers have to build a compromise between guardrails stopping light passenger vehicles versus commercial trucks. Are you seeing, at least in your opinion right now, are you seeing any of that development starting to make its way, or is there a difference in how they design those? What are your thoughts on that?
Guardrails are not designed for vehicles over 5,000 pounds, period.
Wow.
There are times when they will perform, but they're not designed.
Okay.
So I would anticipate that like a 8,000 pound vehicle with a number of these systems, they would do quite well. But they're not designed there. And as we get into overcapacity hits, where say we have one of these terminals on a road that's 75 miles per hour, it was only tested at 62 miles per hour with a 5,000 pound pickup truck. If we don't have a system that has built in excess capacity, one of the big issues that I identified with the device in my daughter's crash and other similar devices is there is no excess capacity, and those people are done for. They're simply they're being handed a 50-foot rope and they've got a 100-foot cliff to go over, and it's going to be ugly. And so one of the things we really have to do is have our automotive manufacturers, we need some design standards that they're going to try to meet. But we also, it brings up a great opportunity. The best guardrail is going to be the smart guardrail, the guardrail that is communicating with our EVs. There's some huge opportunities here to develop a smart system that's actually encouraging the vehicle, move 3 degrees away from me because you're about to hit me. So that communication, those opportunities, that's where the future lies.
And that's interesting. That's something I hadn't even thought about when it comes to smart technology and, say vehicles that have, semi-autonomous abilities and things like that. Now, you spend a lot of time going on the roadways, a lot in Tennessee, and you do travel some looking on the ground. You're on the road looking at guardrails. You're documenting things. You're sending that documentation to political officials. But likewise, you're also working behind the scenes doing some of this political advocacy. You've dealt with state and local lawmakers extensively. Why is this a partisan issue? And, because I don't feel like a crash in kinetic energy and physics is very, very partisan, but where have you seen political success and roadblocks with this?
So I have seen political roadblocks, red and blue, and I've had success, red and blue. And so what I've learned is one of the things is we have 53 state DOTs technically, because we count a couple, Guam and DC and Puerto Rico, but I go with the people that will work with me. If you got a dance partner, you better dance. If you have somebody who won't dance, then you got to wash your hands and move on to the next one. But I have not seen it be partisan, but I have seen, recently we had a great success in Florida with Governor DeSantis with probably close to $100 million worth of guardrails replaced. 1 in every 3 guardrails in that state was fixed. It were either significantly repaired or replaced. At the same time, Disney, which is known as an ultra-liberal corporation, spent $13 million replacing guardrails. I've not had very good success with Governor Newsom out in California. Just ignored a crash where 4 active duty Marines were killed hitting a damaged product that had been there for 6 years.
Wow.
But I've seen the same dismissive attitude from Governor Charlie Baker, a Republican, or Governor Chris Sununu up in New Hampshire. So I wish I could put a red-blue label on this, but it's really about political obstinance with some of these folks who just are. Some of it's class. I think in California and the Northeast, they were not really interested in listening to who they considered to be a redneck from rural East Tennessee. But if somebody shows up and says your house is on fire, I don't care if they're black or white or liberal or Democrat or Republican, or I don't care. If my house is on fire, I'm getting out.
And
it's you don't shoot the messenger.
And absolutely. So what do you see, in your eyes at least right now, what are some challenges that you see in the legislation? What needs to change right now so we can start saving lives, in your opinion?
So one of the things I think we could do is implement, I get very frustrated. I love Ukraine. I've been all across the country, but I also see us dumping. I have friends. I have lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. I have so many friends from Afghanistan, but we have poured so much money into foreign wars. I was once in Moldova. I had a guy say, I'm going to run for president. The first thing I'm going to do is declare war on America, and you're going to bomb us and then rebuild my country, and we're going to become the 51st state. It was a joke, but it was unfortunately true. I would like to see them maybe bomb us in Tennessee with some new guardrails and new bridges, and bomb us in Colorado with those same things and new schools. Invest in America, because this is leading, in Tennessee. I've documented I've just gone through 500 some crashes over the last 11 years. Since my daughter was killed in Tennessee, we have had, just involving safety barrier in the United States, 3 9/11s. We started 2 wars. We have spent trillions of dollars. Invest $25 billion in safety barrier and bridge rail and cable barriers and center median barriers and crash cushions and attenuators and end terminals. Invest in America, and let's rob America's streets, because we could prevent the equivalent of a 9/11 every 3 years by having a safer safety barrier system.
Wow. And so what can people do to push this up the ladder? How can, as I'm driving along the road and as other people's are, we're not guardrail experts, but we all have a role that we can play in this. How do we report this on our local level, but also to our state level? What's the best way to rally people behind this, in your opinion?
I've seen a number of YouTube viewers who got motivated and reported 1 guardrail or 10 guardrails. I had one guy up in Wisconsin who has reported over 258 guardrails. And report one. And engage. Congressman John Duncan was a friend of mine here in Tennessee. I had no political connections before I started, but he said, engage with government closest to the people. So go to your state representative, go to your state senator, and engage with them and say, listen, I have found 4 guardrails here. Can you help me get those fixed? And I don't have time to go out there and look for the other 40, but will you ask the state DOT to place eyes on our roadside? They may miss half of them. But if you get 10 guardrails fixed, I've gotten tens of thousands of guardrails fixed. But at the end of the day, it was not 10,000 guardrails that my daughter hit. It was 1. And so there's a Jewish proverb that you might see at the Holocaust Museum. I really embraced it when I was doing some work, bringing some friends out of Afghanistan, because we failed an awful lot. And a lot of the people we weren't able to help died. Is if you save 1 life, you save the world.
Wow.
If you save 1 life, you save the world. And so go about saving the world by saving that 1 life.
Absolutely. And that 1 life could be, someone's friend, brother, daughter, family member too. I mean, that's absolutely, I think that is a really, really great way to illustrate that point and drive this home. And I mean, as motorists, as anyone, again, we're not, everyone doesn't need to be an expert here, but just as a motorist, maybe 100,000 people in a week on a busy roadway drive by that broken guardrail and nobody says anything. But it's that one person who says something, gets a crew out there. That crew looks at it, says, hey, we need to fix this. And then, maybe a week later, someone hits that guardrail but survives because of that. I think, the work you're doing to spread awareness here, is saving lives every day. And the amazing thing is we sometimes don't know the lives that we saved, but we know we saved them. And I think what you're doing is incredible work. Steve, how can people support what you're doing?
They can watch my videos on YouTube. I recently joined TikTok. You can follow me on Facebook. But the big thing is open your eyes and find your voice. And maybe it's not guardrails for you. Find your voice and engage with our government. We have a government that has grown to ignore the people. And we need an engaged public. So the big thing that people could do is engage with their political leaders. And maybe become the stop sign guy or the pothole guy, or maybe just engage with your political leaders and insist that they advance the goals of the public and not special interests, not industry, and not the government itself, but the people. It's we the people.
Absolutely. That is a great way to put it. Again, you can follow him on YouTube. You can follow him on TikTok, Twitter, online, everywhere. Steve, the Guardrail guy. Steve, I really got to get you back. We just skimmed the surface of this here on the show today, so I definitely want to get you back here in the future, but I want to thank you for joining me right here on Automotive ADHD.
Thanks so much, Matthew. Thanks for having me.
Wow, I know we have had fun here on the show. We have fun all the time, but stopping down and talking about something serious like this is really important. You know, last week I talked about how I don't think government-mandated speed limiters and kill switches are the right solution to our road tragedies, but guardrails and road infrastructure are in the realm of the government. It is what they have authority over, and in many cases, they're not doing a good job with it. So there you go. I really want to thank Steve for coming on the show. Now, don't miss a minute of this show. Lots of great ways to catch it on the radio, AM 1460 and FM 101.1. The Answer, Sundays at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Also, you can find it online wherever fine shows and this one are downloaded. Remember to give it a rating on Spotify as well. Keep in touch with the show on Facebook, facebook.com, Automotive ADHD, as well as send your car sounds in there. Now, I will see you same time, same place, right here next week.